Hello, students. This week's English lesson is dealing with two different types of adjectives. We're going to look at comparative adjectives as well as superlative adjectives. You have used these adjectives a lot in your life, especially if you're talking about bigger or smaller and stuff like that. So we're going to be talking about this particular week. When to use comparative and superlative adjectives correctly. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is comparatives. We're going to look at what exactly is a comparative adjective. In the word comparative, you should hear the word compare. And anytime you want to compare something, usually what you're doing is you're showing the difference between two objects, just two objects whenever you're comparing something. So let's say, for example, I have two cars. I have a Toyota, which is a little bit smaller, and then I've got a Ford that's a little bit bigger. So I have those two items only. A comparative form should be used to show the difference between these two particular items. So, for example, I'm saying that my Ford is big. So, since I'm comparing between the two, I would say the Ford is bigger than the Toyota. Again, I'm just comparing two things, the Ford and the Toyota, that's it. Because the Toyota would be small, we would say that the Toyota is smaller than the Ford. Again, both of those examples, I'm just comparing two items only. One of them is bigger and one of them is smaller. Now, it would be nice if that was just what the rule was, but it just so happens that there's quite a few rules for comparative forms. Okay, we're going to go over through those right now. Rule number one, if an adjective that you're using is just one syllable only, you are going to add the ER to the end of the particular word. So, for example, like in the previous sentence, I had the word small. Small is one syllable. So if I want to use the word small to compare something, it's one syllable. I'm just going to put an ER at the end, so I'd put smaller. Okay, and then a lot of times you'll end up using the word than right behind it. Another one syllable word is the word hard. It's one syllable, if I'm using that comparative, I'm just going to add an ER to the end of it, and I would say it's harder than. Okay. Another one would be like the word slow. Slow is one syllable. So if I was going to use that as comparative, I would put ER, which is slower. So an example over here says the ant is smaller than the hippo. Okay. So that's rule number one. Rule number two deals with if a one syllable adjective would end with a consonant, a vowel, and then another consonant. Then in those situations, we are going to double the last consonant before you add the ER. So for example, the word big. This at the end of it has a consonant, then a vowel, then a consonant. So if you notice that at the end of the word, what you're going to do is you're going to double the last consonant. So you're going to double that G before you put the ER in there. So it's big would be bigger. If you don't, it's going to be biger. I don't think we wouldn't say that the elephant is bigger than the giraffe. You wouldn't want to say that. It's going to be bigger. So we got to double that G. Another example of that would be like the word sad. Here I've got that consonant and then vowel and then consonant ending. So what I want to do is I want to double that D. And I would say that this would be sadder than, okay? So you want to be careful when you're doing those. These are for one syllables. You got that consonant, vowel, consonant ending, double that last consonant. Rule number three deals with whenever you have two syllable adjectives, and if the two syllable adjective ends with a Y, then you need to chop off the Y and replace it with an I before you add the ER into it. So for example, if I was going to use the word happy, two syllables, ends with a Y, I got to subtract the Y, get rid of the Y off of it, and then replace it with an I before you put the ER ending on there. So I would say that I am happier than. Another example of that is the word funny, two syllables, the last letter ends with a Y, so I want to chop that Y off, and then I'm going to add an I before I put my ER on there. So this would be funnier than. So here's my example here. The girl is happier than the duck. Okay, so that's going to be rule number three. Two syllables, ends with Y, chop off that Y, put IER. The rule number four, For anytime you have other two syllable or more than two syllables, and what you're going to do is, let's see, yes, then add the word more before the word. So you're not even going to worry about chopping off any of those Y's. And then if you have a word that has three or more syllables, you're not going to put ER at the end. You're going to put the word more out in front. So, for example, I have the word beautiful. How many syllables we got there? Beautiful. That's three syllables. I wouldn't want to say that person or that flower is beautifuler. That grammatically does not sound correct. So since it's got three syllables, instead of putting er at the end, we're going to put the word more out in front. And so I would say, like we have an example over here, the butterfly is more beautiful than the frog. Here's another word, expensive. How many syllables do we have there? Expensive. I got three syllables. So in that particular case, I'm not going to put an ER at the end. I'm going to put the word more out in front. So I'd say that's more expensive than. Another one we have here is satisfactory. Man, there's a lot of syllables there. Satisfactory. 5 syllables there. So you're not going to say satisfactory. It just doesn't sound very good. So we're going to put the word more out in front. We'd say that's more satisfactory than. So this is going to be for a lot of two-syllable words, but definitely if they have 3 or more, you're going to put that word more out in front. The 5th rule is more the fact that there's just a couple of exceptions to the rule. For example, I have the word good. And I know you're probably saying, Mr. Johnson, the word good has 1 syllable, so let's put the ER at the end of it. So this is gooder. No, there is no such thing as gooder. In this particular situation, we're going to use the word better. You might say that this cake tastes better than this other cake. So we want to use the word better anytime you're trying to emphasize the word good. Same for bad. I know you're saying bad 1 syllable, then double the D and put ER. No, we don't want to say this is badder. This is actually worse. We'd say this coffee tastes worse than the tea or whatever. So if you're comparing 2 items, you're going to use the word better and then worse. And then far is another one too. You wouldn't say farer, you'd say farther. So these are just a couple of exceptions. There are more than these, but I think for the benefit of what we're doing in our unit this week, I think these 3 will be good enough. Especially want to make sure the difference between good and bad. They'd be better and worse. So that was the comparative form. Now forgot. One last thing I want to mention too. Whenever you're doing these comparative forms, make sure you put that word than behind it. I think it helps a lot. So we'd say like the Toyota is smaller than the Ford. The Ford is bigger than the Toyota. The giraffe is bigger, the elephant is bigger than the giraffe. And so you're noticing that the word than is always after that comparative form. Okay. Now we talk about comparatives, let's switch now to superlatives. And superlatives act kind of like comparatives, except we're not going to compare just 2 items. We're going to compare more than 2 items. So if we're comparing 3 items, 4 items, 7 items, every item in the world, that would definitely fall underneath the superlatives. So let's say, for example, now I have 3 cars. I've got a little Toyota, I have a medium-sized Jeep, and then there's a big Ford. So now I have 3 cars instead of 2. If I was going to use the superlative to kind of show the difference that exists between the group, I would have it just a little bit different. I'd say since the Ford is the big one, I would say the Ford is the biggest. So I'm adding the EST ending on the end of it, the biggest. If I was talking about the Toyota, since that is small, then we would say that the Toyota is the smallest, EST. You don't have to know how many items you're comparing. Anytime you have that EST ending, you're basically saying that there's more than 2 items. There could be as many as you want. In this particular situation, we have 3, but there could be more. And again, just like the comparatives, the rules for superlatives kind of follow along the same line. For example, if you have an adjective that has 1 syllable, you're going to add the est in it. So before it was small, we turned it to smaller. This time we're going to say smallest. The word hard, again, before it was harder, add est. This time we're going to say it's the hardest. So the ant is the smallest. Okay. Rule number 2. If you've got that one syllable word that ends with a consonant, vowel, consonant, make sure you double that last consonant. So again, we have the word big. I think before we said that was bigger. Well, in this case, got that consonant, vowel, consonant. Before you add the EST end, you have to double that G. So it'd be the biggest. The word sad, you got that consonant, vowel, consonant ending there. Before you add that EST ending on there, make sure you double that D. You have the saddest. So you have the hippo is the biggest. Rule number 3, again, whenever you have a 2-syllable adjective that ends with a Y, you got to chop off that Y and put an I and then EST. So again, I have the word happy, 2 syllables, happy. Ends with a Y, chop that Y off and then put an I on it before you have the EST to be happiest. Here's the word funny, funny, 2 syllables. Chop off that Y at the end, put an I on before you add the EST. You would say that is the funniest. Okay. Rule number 4, again, if you have a 2-syllable word that doesn't end in Y, or if you have 3 syllables or more, you're not going to put the word more out in front. You're going to put the word most out in front. So again, we have beautiful. We talked about that word before. This case, we're going to put the word most out in front. Say the most beautiful. You're not going to say that is the beautifulest. That grammatically that does not work. The word expensive, 3 syllables. Put the word most out in front. That is the expensivest thing ever. No, don't do that. Don't put the EST at the end of it. You want to put the most expensive. Satisfactory. Again, lots of syllables there. Just say the word the most satisfactory. So this would be the airplane is the most expensive. And then rule number 5, again, there are some exceptions here. If you're talking about this one is good and you're comparing more than 2 items, like you're comparing 3 or more items, you wouldn't say this is the goodest. We would say this is the best. So the comparative form was better. The superlative form is the word best. Same for the word bad. We wouldn't want to say badder. We definitely don't want to say that is the baddest. It would be worse. Or in this case, for superlative, bad would be the worst. Get that T in there. And then far, again, we said that was farther. This time it's going to be farthest. Okay. So remember, whenever you're using the superlative, you always precede that with the word the. So you'd say the Toyota is the smallest, or the smallest truck. To say the Ford is the biggest. Sometimes you don't necessarily have to follow the after, like here you have the airplane is the most expensive. Boom, that's okay. You don't have to write anything else behind it because you're saying that this airplane is the most expensive out of all the other ones. Okay, or Jim Carrey is the funniest comedian. Again, when we know that he is the funniest. So, okay. But don't forget the irregular ones, please. So just as a review, if you have the word good, you're going to compare 2 things. You just want to say better. If you would say this candy tastes better than the other one, or if it's the superlative form, we say this candy tastes the best. So that's all I got for this particular lesson. If I know you guys got this, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will gladly help you as best I can. I'll use this video to help you with the sheets for this particular week. If not, we will see you next time.